I drove 600 miles to celebrate my first grandchild. My daughter's response was to have a security guard throw me out of her baby shower. She called me an embarrassment. She forgot I was the one who co-signed her massive mortgage. My next call wasn't to her. It was to the bank's risk management department, and she was about to find out what happens when a guarantor reports a high-risk loan. Before I begin, thank you for being here, for being part of this community. If you believe in the power of a woman finding her voice and reclaiming her dignity, you are in the right place. Please let me know in the comments where you're listening from. It means the world to me. Now let me tell you what they did to me. My name is Genevieve St. Clair, and at 68, my life was a quiet testament to a mother's enduring love. I lived in a small, paid-off home in the heart of rural South Carolina, a place where the air was thick with the scent of jasmine and the evenings were filled with the gentle chorus of crickets. It was a simple life, a peaceful one, but my heart, for the most part, lived 600 miles away in a lavish new construction home in an exclusive suburb of Charlotte, North Carolina. That was where my daughter, my only child, Candace, lived with her husband, Preston. I had spent my life as a nurse, a career of quiet service and profound sacrifice, and every spare penny, every ounce of my energy had been poured into giving Candace the life I had never had. She was my world, my legacy, the beautiful, ambitious girl who was destined for bigger things than our small town could offer. Years ago, when she and Preston had decided to buy their dream house, a sprawling 6-bedroom monument to suburban success, their ambition had far outpaced their bank account. They couldn't qualify for the massive mortgage on their own. I remember the phone call, Candace's voice a mixture of desperation and a practiced, daughterly sweetness. "Mama," she'd said, "it's the perfect house, the perfect neighborhood. It's the kind of place our children deserve to grow up in. But the bank, they said we need a co-signer, someone with more assets, more stability." I had not hesitated. I had spent my entire life sacrificing for my daughter's dreams. This, I thought, was just the final, most significant act. I drove the long hours to Charlotte, to a cold, impersonal bank office, and I put my entire life on the line for her. I co-signed the massive mortgage, a number so large it made my own hands tremble. And more than that, for the past 3 years, I had been secretly paying a significant portion of their monthly note from my own modest pension, a quiet infusion of cash to keep them afloat, a secret I had kept out of a deep, abiding love and a desire to see my daughter happy. This financial sacrifice was a fact Candace had, over time, come to not just take for granted, but to see as an entitlement. In her mind, the beautiful house, the lavish lifestyle, was a testament to her and Preston's own success. Her mother's quiet, ongoing, and deeply precarious generosity was no longer a gift to be grateful for, but merely part of the background noise of her perfect life, a utility as reliable and as unacknowledged as the running water. My relationship with them had become one of long-distance phone calls, of polite, superficial conversations that never quite touched the heart of things. I saw their perfect life through the glossy, curated lens of social media, a world of fancy dinner parties, of expensive vacations, of a happiness that seemed to have no room for a simple country old woman from South Carolina. But now, there was news that had filled my heart with a pure, uncomplicated joy. Candace was pregnant. My first grandchild. A new life, a new generation, a chance for our family to be truly, finally whole. The baby shower was to be a grand affair, of course, a catered event at their beautiful home with a guest list of all their new important friends. I had not been invited, not officially, but I knew, with the certainty of a mother's heart, that my presence, my surprise arrival, would be a source of joy. I spent a week knitting a beautiful, intricate baby blanket, its soft white yarn a testament to my love, to my excitement. On a bright Saturday morning, I packed the blanket carefully in a gift bag, got in my old, reliable car, and I began the long 600-mile drive to Charlotte. My heart was full of a simple, hopeful anticipation. As the miles of South Carolina pine forests gave way to the bustling highways of North Carolina, my mind drifted back. I remembered Candace at 16, a gifted artist who had dreamed of attending a summer arts program in New York. The cost was astronomical, far beyond what my nurse's salary could afford, but I had seen the fire in her eyes, the passion in her sketches. So I had taken on extra night shifts at the hospital for 6 months, my body aching with a weariness so profound I could barely stand, just to be able to give her that experience. I remember the look on her face when I handed her the acceptance letter and the check for the tuition. It was a look of pure, unadulterated joy. A look I had treasured for over 20 years. That was the daughter I was driving to see. The girl whose dreams I had always put before my own. I was going to surprise my daughter. I was going to celebrate my grandchild. I was going to be a part of their perfect life. At last, I had no idea that I was driving towards the most profound, most public, and most devastating humiliation of my entire life. The 600-mile drive from my quiet corner of South Carolina to the bustling, affluent suburbs of Charlotte was a journey of pure, hopeful anticipation. The sun was shining, the radio was playing my favorite old gospel hymns, and the handmade baby blanket nestled in its gift bag on the passenger seat beside me felt like a tangible symbol of my love. I pictured the look on Candace's face when she saw me. The surprise, the joy, the happy tears. I was her mother after all, and this was her baby shower. Of course, she would be thrilled. I arrived at their house, a magnificent 2-story brick affair on a street lined with perfectly manicured lawns and expensive foreign cars, just as the party was getting into full swing. The driveway was full, so I parked down the street and walked, my steps a little slow, my heart a little nervous, towards the sound of laughter and music. The front door was open and I could see into the house. It was not a small, intimate gathering of family and close friends. It was a huge catered event, a scene from a society magazine. The rooms were filled with dozens of stylish, impeccably dressed strangers, all sipping champagne and nibbling on tiny, elaborate hors d'oeuvres. The decorations were breathtaking, towering arrangements of white roses, balloons that grazed the high ceilings, a cake that looked like a work of art. It was a party designed to be photographed, to be envied. I stood in the doorway for a moment, feeling a little out of place in my simple Sunday dress, the gift bag clutched in my hand. I saw Candace across the room, a radiant, pregnant queen, holding court amidst a circle of her adoring, wealthy friends. She looked beautiful, she looked happy, and she looked like a complete stranger to me. Then she saw me. The radiant smile on her face faltered, replaced by a look of pure, unadulterated horror. Her eyes widened, her hand flying to her mouth as if to stifle a scream. She quickly excused herself from her friends and rushed towards me, her movements sharp, angry. "Mama!" she hissed, her voice a low, vicious whisper as she grabbed my arm and pulled me back onto the porch, away from the prying eyes of her guests. "What are you doing here? You can't be here." I stared at her, my own smile of greeting freezing on my face. What do you mean, Candace? I drove all the way from home to surprise you for your baby shower." "A surprise?" she repeated, her laugh a short, ugly, humorless bark. "This is a catastrophe. Look at you, your dress, your hair. You don't fit in here. My friends, Preston's parents, they're all here. What will they think?" Her words were a series of small, sharp physical blows. I looked down at my simple, clean dress, at my comfortable shoes, at the lovingly wrapped gift in my hand, and I felt a hot, sickening wave of shame wash over me. I was an embarrassment. My country mother, a blemish on her perfect, sophisticated life. Her husband, Preston, appeared at the door then, his own face a mask of cold, barely concealed fury. He saw me and his lip curled into a faint sneer of disgust. He didn't speak to me, he spoke to his wife. "Candace," he said, his voice a low, commanding growl, "handle this now." And Candace, my daughter, my own flesh and blood, chose him. She chose her new wealthy life, her new important friends, over her own mother. She turned to me, her face now a mask of cold, hard resolve. "You have to leave, Mama," she said, her voice devoid of any warmth, any love. "You are ruining my party. You are ruining everything." She didn't even have to say the words. She just gave a small, almost imperceptible nod to a large, serious-looking man in a dark suit who had been standing by the door. A man I now realized was a hired security guard. The guard stepped forward, his face impassive. "Ma'am," he said, his voice not unkind but firm, "I'm going to have to ask you to come with me." He gently but firmly took my arm and began to lead me away from the house, away from the party, away from my own daughter. I didn't resist. I was too shocked, too heartbroken, too profoundly, utterly humiliated to even speak. I was being escorted out of my own daughter's baby shower like a common trespasser, a criminal. As he led me down the long, manicured driveway, past the expensive cars, past the laughing, oblivious guests who now stared with a mixture of pity and scorn, I felt my entire world collapsing. My mind was a slow-motion reel of my own humiliation. The pitying look from the caterer as I passed, the whispered comment from one of Candace's friends, "Oh my God, is that her mother?" The final, triumphant look on Candace's face as she stood on the porch, her hand on her pregnant belly, watching me be led away like a piece of trash. She had successfully eliminated the threat, the embarrassment, the country mother who had threatened to ruin her perfect day. I sat in my car, parked on that quiet suburban street for over an hour, the handmade baby blanket still on the seat beside me, a pathetic symbol of a love that had been so cruelly, so publicly rejected. I watched the party continue without me, the sounds of their celebration a distant, mocking echo. My heart, which had been so full of love and hope just a few hours before, was now a cold, dead, empty thing. The shock, the grief, the profound humiliation, they were all there. But beneath them, a new feeling, a feeling I hadn't known I was still capable of, began to stir. It was a cold, quiet, and utterly ferocious fury. My daughter's love was a performance. My sacrifice had been met with the ultimate act of disrespect. I was not family to them. I was a liability. And it was in that moment of cold, clear, and absolute realization that I remembered my own power. My name was not just on their life, it was on their mortgage. And I, the woman they had just had escorted from their property, was about to foreclose on their entire fraudulent world. The 600-mile drive back to South Carolina was a journey through a landscape of pure, unadulterated fury. The initial paralyzing shock of my public humiliation had given way to a cold, hard, and deeply clarifying rage. The heartbroken mother who had wept in her car outside her daughter's party was gone, replaced by a woman of 68, a woman who had sacrificed everything, a woman who had been deemed an embarrassment, a woman who had finally had enough. I did not weep. I did not listen to my gospel hymns. I just drove, my hands gripping the steering wheel, my mind a cold, efficient machine, processing the full, devastating scope of my daughter's betrayal. She had not just uninvited me, she had ejected me. She had used a hired guard to remove her own mother from her home, a home my own life savings had secured for her. She had chosen the approval of her snobbish, wealthy in-laws over the love of the woman who had raised her. She had looked at my lifetime of sacrifice and had deemed it, and me, tacky. The word echoed in my mind, a sharp, ugly, and unforgivable insult. Tacky. My simple dress was tacky. My handmade gift was tacky. My love, my presence, my very being was tacky. As I drove through the night, the miles blurring by, my fury began to coalesce into a plan. A quiet, legal, and utterly devastating plan. My daughter and her husband were so concerned with appearances, with status, with money, they had reduced our relationship to a transaction, one in which I was a liability. Very well. I would respond in the only language they seemed to understand. Thought of the mortgage, the massive, terrifying document I had co-signed all those years ago. I remembered the bank manager explaining the terms, the responsibilities of a co-signer. I had been the guarantor, the one whose solid financial history and substantial savings had made the loan possible. I was not just a name on a piece of paper. I was the financial bedrock of their entire existence, or bedrock they had just with their cruel, thoughtless actions dynamited. I arrived home just as the sun was beginning to rise, my body aching with a weariness that was more than just the long drive. It was the weariness of a lifetime of unappreciated love. I did not rest. I went to my old metal file cabinet, the one where I kept all my important papers, and I found it. The original mortgage agreement, a thick, intimidating document, its pages full of the dense legal jargon I had once been so afraid of. Now I read it with a new, cold clarity. I was not just a co-signer, I was the primary co-signer. My financial standing was the foundation of the entire loan, and in the fine print, the section on loan covenants and conditions, I found the clause I had been searching for. The one the bank manager had so carefully explained to me all those years ago. It was a clause that dealt with material changes in the guarantor's circumstances or willingness to guarantee the loan. It stated in clear, unambiguous language that if the primary co-signifer were to formally notify the bank of a significant and irreparable breakdown in the relationship with the primary borrower, a breakdown that would lead them to withdraw their financial and moral guarantee of the loan, the bank reserved the right to reevaluate the loan's risk profile and, if deemed necessary, to call the entire loan balance due. It was a kill switch, a legal contractual kill switch designed to protect the bank from exactly this kind of situation, a situation where the financial guarantor of a loan could no longer, in good conscience, support the borrower. A slow, cold, and deeply satisfying smile spread across my face. My daughter and her husband had treated me like a liability. I was about to become the biggest, most catastrophic liability they had ever known. I spent Sunday resting, gathering my strength, my resolve, hardening into an unshakable, diamond-hard certainty. I was no longer a mother grieving for her daughter's lost love. I was a financial guarantor, about to report a high-risk, non-performing asset. On Monday morning, I would not drive back to Charlotte. I would not confront them. I would not engage in their petty, dramatic world. I would simply go to a hotel in a nearby city, a quiet, anonymous place where I could conduct my business in peace. And from there, I would make a single, calm, and utterly devastating phone call. The phone call that would bring their entire fraudulent house of cards crashing down. They had called security on me. I was about to call the bank on them. And my call, I knew, would be infinitely more effective. On Monday morning, I checked into a quiet, respectable hotel in Columbia, a city far enough away from my small town to be anonymous, but close enough to feel like I was still on my own turf. I sat in the clean, impersonal room, the mortgage documents spread out on the desk before me, my heart a calm, steady drum. The time for anger, for grief was over. It was time for business. At precisely 10 o'clock, I made the call. I did not call the general customer service number for the mortgage bank. I called the direct line for their risk management department, a number I had found with a little careful research online. I was not a customer with a complaint. I was a guarantor with a warning. A professional, slightly bored-sounding woman answered. Risk management, this is Sarah. Good morning, Sarah. I began, my voice calm, clear, and full of a quiet, unshakable authority. My name is Genevieve Sinclair. I am calling to report a material change in circumstances regarding a mortgage on which I am the primary cosigner. There was a pause on the other end of the line, the sound of typing. Okay, Mrs. Sinclair, do you have the loan number? I gave it to her, reading it directly from the document in front of me. I gave her the property address in Charlotte. I gave her my own personal information, my social security number, my date of birth, all the details that would prove my identity and my legal standing. Yes, I have the account pulled up, Mrs. Sinclair, she said, her tone still a little bored. What seems to be the problem? The problem, Sarah, I replied, my voice as cool and as steady as a frozen lake, is that I am hereby formally withdrawing my financial and moral guarantee for this loan. There has been a sudden and severe breakdown in my relationship with the primary borrowers, my daughter and son-in-law. I can no longer, in good conscience, vouch for their character or their financial stability. I am officially reporting this loan as a high risk of imminent default. The boredom in her voice vanished, replaced by a new, sharp, professional attention. I see, Mrs. Sinclair, she stammered, clearly taken aback. That is a very serious statement. Can you provide any further details? I can, I said. On Saturday, I was physically removed from the property by a security guard at my own daughter's request during her baby shower because my presence was deemed an embarrassment. I believe this constitutes a severe breakdown in the family relationship as outlined in the loan covenants. Furthermore, I added, my voice now like a shard of ice, I have reason to believe that their financial situation is far more precarious than what they disclosed on their original loan application. I can no longer be a party to this risk. There was a long, profound silence on the other end of the line. I could almost hear the gears turning in her mind, the risk assessment algorithms flashing red. A cosigner, a guarantor, the very person whose financial stability had made the loan possible, was not just pulling her support, she was actively flagging the loan as a toxic asset. For a bank, this was a 5-alarm fire. Thank you for this information, Mrs. Sinclair, Sarah said finally, her voice now full of a new, grave seriousness. We will be escalating this to our legal department immediately. A senior loan officer will be in touch with you shortly. I had done it. I had lit the fuse. I spent the rest of the day in my quiet hotel room. I ordered room service. I watched an old movie. I did not feel a sense of triumph, not yet. I felt only a profound, weary sense of finality. I had just, with a single 10-minute phone call, set in motion the complete and utter destruction of my own daughter's life. It was a terrible, necessary, and deeply, deeply sad thing to have to do. The call from the bank's legal department came the next morning. It was a man named Mr. Davenport, a senior vice president, his voice a low, serious rumble. He asked me to recount my story again, which I did with the same calm, dispassionate clarity. He asked me if my decision was final. I told him it was. I see, he said when I had finished. Thank you for your candor, Mrs. Sinclair. You have given us a great deal to consider. We will be reviewing the loan agreement and taking all necessary steps to protect the bank's interests. I knew what that meant. Protecting the bank's interests was a corporate euphemism for unleashing the full, merciless power of our legal department to mitigate our risk. My daughter and her husband, so secure in their beautiful, expensive home, had no idea that a financial hurricane was gathering just off the coast. A hurricane that I myself had summoned, the hurricane that was about to make landfall and wash their entire world away. The bank, as I had known it would, moved with the swift, merciless efficiency of a predator that has just sensed a mortal wound in its prey. A cosigner, the financial bedrock of a massive loan, formally withdrawing her support and flagging the borrowers as a high risk of default is not a situation any financial institution takes lightly. It is a 5-alarm fire in the risk management department. Their legal team immediately went to work. They reviewed the original mortgage application and saw, with a dawning, horrified clarity, what I had known all along, that Candace and Preston, with their own modest incomes and significant credit card debt, would never have qualified for a loan of this magnitude without my name, my assets, my perfect credit history backing them up. I was not just a cosigner. I was the entire foundation of the loan. And I had just very calmly and very legally declared that foundation to be unstable. They had no choice but to protect their investment. They invoked Clause 17B of the mortgage agreement, a dense, rarely used piece of legal jargon that I now knew by heart, the material adverse change clause. It gave the bank the right, in the event of a significant unforeseen change in the borrower's or guarantor's circumstances that materially increased the bank's risk, to call the entire loan balance due. The official letter, sent via certified mail, arrived at my daughter's beautiful Charlotte home on a Thursday. I can only imagine the scene. Candace, likely still basking in the afterglow of her successful baby shower, would have seen the intimidating envelope from the mortgage bank's legal department and opened it with a flicker of annoyance, assuming it was just more boring paperwork. And then she would have read the words, the cold, hard, and utterly devastating words that would bring her entire world crashing down. Dear Mr. and Mrs. Monroe, it would have begun. Due to a material adverse change in the conditions under which this loan was underwritten, specifically the formal withdrawal of support from your primary financial guarantor, we are hereby invoking our rights under Clause 17B of your mortgage agreement. The full outstanding balance of your loan is now due and payable in full within 30 days. Failure to remit the full balance will result in the immediate initiation of foreclosure proceedings. You're now permitted to remit the full balance will result in the immediate initiation of foreclosure proceedings. The panic, I imagine, would have been immediate and absolute. The full balance of the mortgage, a sum so large, so impossibly out of their reach, it might as well have been $1 billion. They would have been trapped, their beautiful dream home suddenly transformed into a multi-$100,000 prison of their own making. But the bank wasn't finished. The letter, I am sure, would have contained a second, even more devastating paragraph. Alternatively, it would have read, you may seek to refinance the entire loan on your own without the original cosigner. A new loan application would be subject to our standard income and credit verification. And that was the true checkmate. Because they couldn't. Their credit was stretched to its absolute limit. Their incomes, without my secret monthly contributions, were not nearly enough to qualify for a loan of that size. They were trapped. The frantic, hysterical phone call from my daughter came that evening. I had been waiting for it. I answered on the second ring, my voice a calm, serene, "Hello? Mama," she shrieked, her voice a raw, ragged sound of pure, unadulterated terror. "The bank, they sent a letter. They're calling the loan due. They said you withdrew your support. What did you do? You've ruined us." I let her scream for a moment, her panic a quiet, satisfying symphony on the other end of the line. "I did nothing, Candace," I replied, my voice as cool and as calm as a winter morning. "I simply informed the bank of the truth, that our family relationship had suffered an irreparable breakdown, a fact you yourself demonstrated quite clearly when you had me escorted from your home by a security guard. But that was just a misunderstanding," she stammered, her lies now pathetic, desperate. "Was it?" I asked quietly. "It felt quite clear to me. You made your choice, my dear. You chose your new fancy life over your own mother, and now you must face the consequences of that choice. It seems that without my tacky country name on your mortgage, your fancy life is not quite as secure as you thought it was. But we'll be homeless," she wept. "That does sound like a problem," I replied, my voice devoid of any sympathy. "I suggest you speak to your husband. He seems to be a man full of financial solutions." I hung up the phone, my hand perfectly steady. The house of cards they had so arrogantly, so cruelly built on the foundation of my love and my sacrifice was now collapsing in on itself. They had called me a liability. I had just become the one who called their loan due. The final, satisfying act of my quiet revenge was not a single dramatic event, but a slow, agonizing, and very public unraveling of my daughter's life. The bank's demand for immediate repayment or a new, unco-signed mortgage was a financial death sentence, and they knew it. They were thrown into a state of absolute, frantic panic. They couldn't possibly pay off the mortgage, and their attempts to refinance the loan on their own were, as I had known they would be, a series of humiliating failures. Their incomes were too low, their credit card debt too high. No bank would touch them. They were forced to do the one thing they had always dreaded, the one thing that would be a public admission of their spectacular failure. They had to sell their dream home, and they had to do it fast. A desperate fire sale attempt to avoid foreclosure. The beautiful sprawling house in the exclusive Charlotte suburb, the one that had been the stage for their social climbing, the one they had banished me from, now had a stark, ugly for sale sign on its pristine lawn, a public monument to their own greed and stupidity. Their lives, as I heard through the quiet, satisfying reports of my old friends and family, completely unraveled. Their important friends, the ones they had been so desperate to impress, now avoided them. The stench of financial failure, a social poison they did not want to be associated with. Their marriage, a union built on a foundation of shared ambition and superficiality, crumbled under the immense weight of their new, stressful reality. They fought constantly, their arguments, I was told, echoing through their now empty, cavernous house, their voices sharp with blame and recrimination. They called me, of course. They begged, they pleaded, they threatened, they promised to change. They offered apologies that were as hollow and as worthless as their own financial statements. "Mama, please," Candace had wept into the phone one night. Just call the bank. Tell them it was a mistake. Tell them you'll co-sign again. We'll lose everything." I had listened to her pathetic, self-serving pleas, and I had felt nothing. No pity, no sympathy. Only the cold, hard satisfaction of a lesson well taught. "I am sorry, Candace," I had replied, my voice calm, final. "But I am no longer financially entangled with you or your husband. I have withdrawn my support permanently. I wish you the best." And then I had blocked her number. My revenge was complete. It had not been a messy, emotional confrontation. It had been a quiet, clinical, and devastatingly powerful phone call. I had not crashed their party. I had, with a single strategic move, foreclosed on their entire fraudulent life. I never saw them again. They sold the house at a loss. Their dreams of a massive profit turned to dust. The last I heard, they had divorced. Their partnership of greed, unable to survive the harsh reality of their own consequences. And me, I stayed in my small, quiet home in South Carolina, my peace restored, my dignity reclaimed. My revenge was not in their ruin, but in my own quiet, unshakable strength. I had been deemed an embarrassment, a liability, a woman to be escorted from the premises. But in the end, I was the one who held the deed, the one who held the power, the one who had, with a single devastating phone call, proven that a mother's love, when betrayed, can be a liability of a very, very different kind. And that was a truth that was worth more than any house, any amount of money. It was worth everything.